All right, you good?
Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. Eder Garavito here, co-host of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest who really doesn't need an introduction, the one and only Dr. F. Scott Feil. Many of you know him as a driving force behind everything HET, but he's also a dedicated educator and brilliant entrepreneur. Scott, thanks for being here with me today, man. And I think the biggest thing I want to thank you for is letting me take the reins of HET for the next 45 to 60 minutes.
Yeah, man, it's cool being on this side of the microphone. I don't get out behind it, the guest seat or the host seat rather all that often to be the guest. So, it's a neat little change of pace for me. And thank you for coming on and hosting because it's been awesome to see some different points of view and get some different people in and I love what you're doing. So happy to be here, man.
Well, I appreciate it, man. So with that in mind, you've added a lot of different co-hosts to the podcast, including myself, right, in the last year. How have like their unique ideas and areas of expertise really helped evolve the podcast? Have you seen any patterns?
Yeah, I think the biggest pattern is that there has been no pattern, which is cool. It's nice to get different perspectives and fresh perspectives. And at first, like, as we've brought people in and out of the co-hosting seat, it was a little nerve-wracking because it was like I don't know if they're gonna enjoy it or they want to do it or how long they'll stay. And at first I was kind of concerned, but then I realized like having like a little bit of a revolving door kept things really fresh and actually showed me even more perspectives than I even imagined. And so it's been kind of nice to have some different people bringing different points of view to the table. And what's even cooler is that each co-host that's come on has their own pool of network and people they can reach out to and interview. People that I wouldn't have had no idea. They haven't been on my radar. So it's so nice to have those people highlighted and spotlighted that are doing amazing things and helping push the needle of education and healthcare. So yeah, I've just been letting it organically kind of happen and it's been really working. I enjoy it.
So, that's great. As yourself as an entrepreneur, sometimes maybe just not having a process is the process, and I love that. But the podcast has over 500 episodes now, man. So the HET podcast has obviously gained incredible momentum, probably one of the biggest momentums with healthcare education podcasts out there. In your opinion, like what has been the biggest driving force behind this growth?
Yeah, again, it all kind of started with two guys who struggled in PT school, right? Like we didn't know what the issue was, but we knew it wasn't a smooth ride for us, right? And so we knew that education could probably be delivered a little bit better, in the world of healthcare, specifically in DPT programs. But we didn't know. We were green. We had never taught before. I barely learned. So it was interesting to have, the experts on to talk about what they felt was broken in healthcare education and how they would go about fixing it, right? So it kind of started that way. And then it got bigger than that, right? It kind of became not only a vehicle for helping teachers teach, it also got into the student aspect of helping learners learn and helping the teachers learn too, right? Because we have to do some learning as well. And, that was really interesting to me because I realized I wasn't a good learner throughout most of college, right? I was a rote memorizer, which, we know it just isn't learning. So the vision and the mission became a little bit bigger than that. And it really became like, let's find best practices in teaching and in learning, and then let's really push the envelope for what's broken in healthcare and how can we fix it, and what's broken in healthcare education, and what are the things that we can control to actually make an impact and put into action all these things that we can do to help people become the best version of themselves, whether it be as a teacher or a learner. And that's kind of really the point where we're at now.
I think the thing that I liked the most about the HET podcast, even before I came on, and about you, Scott, was You know the co-host and you as a host, I listened to several episodes, and you and I met through a collaborative episode as well that we recorded. You all say things that need to be said that people don't say. And I love that. Are you hiding behind a screen and a mic? Who cares? The thing of it is like that we're finally have some a resource where people can relate, say like, yeah, that is happening to me. Yeah, that is bad. Yeah, that does need to change. Right. The biggest thing for me was we always talk about the healthcare, healthcare needs to change, all that stuff. But nobody really ever talks so much about healthcare education is broken and needs to change. And that's where I found you, man. I'm like, I'm gonna like this guy. Let's talk. And so I really loved that part of it, just being able to just be raw and just say things that people don't really want to say. And I think they need to be said.
Yeah, I mean, we have to have the hard conversations, right? And what I've found over the years is like if you have the hard conversations and you come out on the other end with some sort of answer, whether it be, right or wrong, it's worth, listening to and hearing differing points of view. But the fear and anxiety and nervousness around those difficult conversations is really not that bad. Like it's we catastrophize and make it so much more like hard than it needs to be. Like it's so much worse. Oh my goodness, well, what are we gonna do? What happens if they say this or we say this or whatever, right? Like just pull the band-aid off. It's really not that bad, and having those hard conversations and difficult conversations are what really drive that, needle forward when it comes to taking action and implementing for change. And that's where I feel like again we can have differing points of view and differing viewpoints on certain topics, but we can still respect each other and have a good conversation about it. And are you going to change my mind? Maybe not, but at least we're hearing people out and we're kind of learning about the possibilities of what if, because the thing I love about business and entrepreneurship in particular is CEOs kind of tend to make decisions like pretty quickly, especially the good ones, right? And even when it's the wrong decision, they have the ability to pivot very quick and go on to the next decision to try to get it back on track and right the ship until they get it right eventually, And I feel like we kind of need more of that in academia because it's such a slow moving ship. It feels just very antiquated and outdated. So let's just start having the difficult conversations. Let's see what happens.
I don't think it feels antiquated. I mean, it really is. The system is, that's the problem. And
Yeah.
and you're right. I don't think I've had a negative experience when I've been verbal about some of these things with some of my colleagues and peers where I thought I was going to have a negative experience. So I think it's good to just put yourself out there. Always think before you speak, just kind of how you're going to phrase things. And I love that. Let's shift to like the entrepreneur, Scott, because man, you're a master of all trades and jacks over everything. So there's not like really anything you don't do. And I know I just butchered that statement. Doesn't matter. So now you have courses like Fund Your Own Conference, which I've heard awesome things about, mastering the art of education, and even how to get a job in PTA academia. So, how did you identify these needs with your audience? Like, you just came up with these courses out of nowhere because you thought they were going to be good, or did you identify a need first and then went after it?
A little bit of both. So the self-fund your own conference course basically was a course that I know I needed, right? I needed to come up with ways that weren't reliant on the university or, um, funding from elsewhere, right? I didn't want to rely on anybody or anything for funding for my conferences. So I said, all right, well, what do I do when I need, money for conferences, right? How do I fund my conferences? And so I just put together the course, and it turns out people actually need that as well because you have students that are on a low budget that want to go to these courses, and some of them have to attend conferences, right? It's part of their duties as a student before they graduate, but they have no budget, and they got to figure out a good way to get there. So that was one demographic that it helped. Then we have professors, right, who have to go to conferences as well, and Sometimes they're presenting at the conference, and a lot of times, if that's the case, their university will pay for it. But at the end of the day, there's still a limited budget. And if the department is blown through that budget, or you've already used up your budget, you may not be able to go to a conference or a CEU course that you want to until next year when the budget starts over again, right? And then there was clinicians, right, who just want to get better and improve their skill sets, and they want to go to, a CEU course or something like that, or a track of CEU courses, but their employer doesn't have funds for it. They don't have a budget for it. They don't, one of their benefits isn't more CEUs, so if you're looking to set your own path and your own career and improve yourself, then you've got to kind of fund your own, CEUs and conferences. So, that one just kind of worked because everybody kind of needs it, right? Um, the how to get a job in PTA academia came about because people were interested in teaching, but they didn't necessarily want to go through a terminal degree, and they wanted to kind of dip their toes in the water and see if teaching was really for them. And PTA programs are a great place to kind of do that because in DPT programs you need a DPT at the very least, but then you also kind of need to start looking toward a terminal degree. Well, in PTA programs, the DPT is plenty. That's all you need because it's an associate. So it was a course that kind of a lot of people asked us for because they were like, well, how do I get started? And I was like, well, you could jump into a DPT program right off the bat, but it could be difficult, right? It's already pretty competitive, and you're going up against people that have terminal degrees. So maybe a challenge, but like, you could start at an undergrad program even, you could teach anatomy or, physiology or kinesiology or exercise science or whatever for undergrad. Like that would be totally acceptable too. See if you like it, try it for a semester as a contributing faculty or an adjunct and see what you think, right? And if you want to take it a step further, you can get into the physical therapy realm by going into the PTA program. So that one kind of started by just our audience really kind of asking for something like that. Um, and then
And
the
you li- and
mass,
you li- and you listen, which is great.
well, I mean, that 7 years, we finally got wise and we're like, all right, well, what do you need? We've done this long enough. We kind of know what we think is needed. What do you need? Right. So we just kind of put it out there and asked, and like, the audience thankfully is very responsive, and they've told us over the years what they would love to see. So we started just giving them what they wanted. And so yeah, the mastering teaching class is under works now. It's a three-part series, which is actually done by Casey Dennis, who is in her EDD program as we speak. And that's really for like people who've been teaching for a little while, like in their first 5 years or so, and just want to get better at the art and craft of teaching. Because it is a skill set. It's just like anything else. It's learned, and you have to find your own personal flow and style. But yeah, it takes a while to get good at teaching. So the first level is done, and that'll be released pretty soon. And then the second level will be shortly after to follow, and then the third level will be probably early next year. So we're excited to kind of offer these courses and, just kind of help people out. And again, if you ever have any needs or want to know more about other things in the world of teaching and academia, reach out to us, send us an email, hetpodcast@gmail.com. Just, hit us up on social media at HET Podcast everywhere. Like we're listening. We're glad to provide what you need. So we look forward to the next phase of what the audience thinks they need.
Man, I wish I would have access to some of these courses, especially kind of how to get into academia. And I know you and I have recorded, I think, 2 episodes on that they can listen to as well. Um, I've been a guest in a couple of podcasts, and the hosts have asked me this question. I'll tell you my answer after you answer. But man, you're doing so much, and you have a family, and you do sports with the kids and all this stuff. Like, how do you get all this stuff done? How do you complete all these things? You're running like 5 different entrepreneurial endeavors, and you're working a full-time job. You have your family. How do you get things done, man?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of simple things that I do to keep things simple, right? Like the first thing is everything entrepreneurial falls under one umbrella, right? It's kind of my area of expertise, right? My zone of genius. And that's basically where healthcare, business, and education intersect. That's my bread and butter, right? So that's kind of my umbrella of the things I like to focus on. And with that, it's, basically I have a business side of it, which is, PT educator. And then I have the education side of things, which is the HET podcast, right? So those are kind of the two big ones, right? Luckily, the audience for both of those is healthcare practitioners, right? For the most part. So it's that kind of works itself out. Then I kind of take the next phase of like, all right, so I've got the business over here, right? I have the job and the educational side of things over there, and it's just about setting boundaries, right? Like you've got to set pretty hard boundaries. You have to prioritize what's important to you first, right? So for me, it's family and faith, right? And then build everything else around that, And I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to build and grow a business, and it consumes them and it becomes too much, and that's the priority, that everything's work, 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 and fix that and get that done. And then they tend to lose their priorities, right? And then the third one, the easiest one for me, is just time blocking. You know, um, ADHD is new to me. I kind of just was diagnosed about 2 years ago, but I knew something was going on, right? I knew I had something, and it makes sense now. In hindsight, it totally checks. And it's like, oh yeah, I did have that. But time blocking for me has been the biggest save as far as like staying on track, staying on target, getting all the things done. I wake up, every morning and I've got my whole day pretty much blocked out hour by hour, right? Every hour has a name for what I'm specifically working on. And I kind of use the Pomodoro technique where it's like, about 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, kind of stuff like that to break it up a little bit, and give myself little rest breaks. And then on top of that, the one thing I have had to switch and change a little bit and personalize about time blocking is I leave the last 2 hours of the day as what I call like fixer upper hours. So anything I didn't get through in the day, or if I didn't hit my three needle movers for the day, I'll go back and I'll fix it in those 2 hours. Because inevitably, like a call will happen, or somebody will ask you for something that they need, or whatever. And it's up to you to decide, like, yes, I can address that now, and that's a fire that needs to be put out, or like, no, that's not a big deal. That can wait. Um, so I leave myself a little cushion at the end of the day to kind of catch up and fix things if something, got off track a little bit. And that's the only way that I've been able to keep myself, moving forward in a positive direction, because otherwise I'd be all over the place and I'd have too many things I could work on and I'd never get anything done. So that's kind of my big three steps for, keeping everything, all the balls in the air and juggling, several things at once.
Man, I think you and I have related on the ADHD thing as well. And so my answer when your answer is great, of course, but my answer when I've been asked this is like honestly, I just kind of look at it I'm like I don't know how I get it done. I just do,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I still make time for my wife and things like that. And my wife comes up here and she's like, I have no idea how you get this all done. I'm like, I don't either. I just do. But then once I sort of like reflected on that, I realized I do some of the same things you do, which is time blocking and I block my calendar. I say I'm going to work on things from this time to this time, or sometimes I'll block an entire day and I'll shift my schedule. Just being organized, I think, in calendars and your time is essential when when somebody's trying to do so many things at once, because you as an entrepreneur as well, you have all these entrepreneurial endeavors. Most people can't just leave their full-time job that is funding their salary to just pursue an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? And so we still you and I still have to work full time. Speaking of more entrepreneurial things, there's a book on healthcare leadership coming in 2025, right? Fill us in on
Yeah.
that. Fill us in on
Yeah.
that, man.
Yeah. So yeah, we decided that, over the years we've learned a thing or two on healthcare leadership and leadership in general. And we've got a book coming out written by all of the co-hosts for the HET podcast and some of the behind the scenes members as well. Um, just utilizing their expertise and really going into the thing that they love most about leadership telling their story of how they use it in their own leadership, and then basically giving tips, tricks, and pointers on how to get better at that aspect of leadership and how to work on leadership, through their eyes and their lens and what they've seen work. And this has been a project that's kind of been in the works for a little while because it really takes us to the next phase of the healthcare education transformation podcast, right? Like we've listened to all these experts over the years, right? 500 plus episodes, and now we're starting to kind of listen to the audience and give them the things they want to get better at, and start to sprinkle in some little courses, right? We also have kind of started a speaking agency on top of that for healthcare providers that can actually, go out and give speeches, right? To talk on stages and give those inspirational keynotes and things like that. But also we happen to have the, credentials behind our name too, right? So it elevates the level of credibility for speakers, right? And the book kind of ties in with that because the book will be, basically on leadership. And if I had to guess, we'll probably have a course based on the book. And then a lot of the authors that contributed to the book will then be able to go on and speak toward leadership and give keynotes and webinars and workshops on leadership to businesses, to universities, to anybody looking to kind of help their team with growing their leadership skills. And, we kind of got to thinking that, like, all right, if this is, going to be all about leadership, what got us to this point in our life that we're, able to lead and do these things as leaders? And really it kind of came back to metacognition, right? And so the title of the book, the working title for now is the metacognition of leadership, right? And we thought if we're going to have this book on thinking about thinking and how it led us to become great leaders and how leaders think, we should probably also have a course of some sort, or a network or a community to support this, right? To have elevated thinking for elevated thinkers, right? And so that's where we came up with the Metacognition of Leadership Institute, or MOLI, as we're calling it for short. And it's basically just a place for people to come who are, professors, who are students, who are business owners, CEOs, C-suite level execs, high performers, leaders, right? To come in and share their thoughts and ideas on how they think and the thought process that goes into higher level thinking, right? So, metacognition, if we're summarizing it simply, is just thinking about thinking, right? And I think we've realized that we need to do more of that. And so that's where we kind of came up with the idea of the book and now the Metacognition of Leadership Institute.
I think hopefully many of us remember that Amazon started by just selling books, right? And now they sell everything. And so, not to compare apples to oranges, but like I love how you start with I'm writing a book. Well, we're writing a book, but then we're also going to have a course and we're also going to have this. It branches out. And a lot of people, I think, struggle to, if they're starting a business, to really change, shift, or be dynamic with those processes. My last name is Garavito. It doesn't really look good on any sort of paper, I think. That's just me. But what I love, about this speaker agency you're talking about is you named it Feel Good Speakers Agency. And I love that because that's your last name and it just flows, man. I love it. So like with that, what specific gap are you hoping to fill with those speakers?
Yeah, I mean, again, like in my mind, right now, leaders aren't great thinkers. They're just, we need to elevate the thinking of our leadership. We need to have them, critically thinking, independently thinking, and making better decisions, right? And so the fact that we learned how to do all of that through our graduate school journeys and then eventually also a lot of terminal degree journeys as well, right? The amount of thinking that goes on, and now that we kind of get paid for, right? Like once you get into academia, like you really are paid for thinking, which is kind of cool. So we've got to start putting our brains to use and really using our brain power to get effective outcomes, and then be able to teach the way we think to the next generation or our team or our employees or our students or whatever it may be, right? So with Feel Good Speaking Agency, it was really about like, you know, there's people out there giving keynote speeches on leadership and on all the things that we could probably talk about as well, right? But it's like we also happen to have a bunch of letters after our name that really make us qualified to do the deep dives on why this stuff works and the research behind it and how to support what we're talking about, right? So it's not just like rah, rah, get you inspired, right? And then you're out of there. It's a little bit of inspiration, but really it's also the tactical stuff and the research that supports what we're talking about. So, we have every bit of permission to go out and speak and do these keynote speeches and then these workshops on top of that to really help not just healthcare, but any industry in general. Right. Because the cool thing is thinking and leadership and independent thinking, and critical thinking, all of those are broad transferable topics that can be used anywhere and should be used anywhere, right? We just happen to have a really good grasp on it, and we're starting to put it into terms and into definitions and into ways that are easily understandable. And that's, to me, that's kind of the hard part that professors do really well, is take the difficult stuff and deliver it in a format that's easy and makes it stick. So I think it was really just trying to fill the void of like how to take complex topics and ideas regarding thinking and critical thinking and leadership and making them easily deliverable and packageable to anybody, any industry.
Yeah, I love that, man. So you mentioned this a couple of times that those involved with Feel Good Speaking Agency and those involved with MOLI, we should or they should be able to go out there and give these speeches because they have a lot of letters behind their name. Now, here's the deal. Like, I'm pursuing my terminal degree, hopefully done in a year. And what I've come to learn is that sometimes letters behind the name are meaningless. Like, however, the way that I now interpret all these things is you have letters behind your name, prove it to me, right? I
Yep.
want to make sure that you actually kind of know what you're talking about because sometimes they are just letters. So I'm really curious as to how Scott has identified specific individuals with letters behind their name, right? Like which characteristics of these individuals have you looked for to bring on to these projects?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it goes back to physical therapy, right? And like the general public doesn't really have a great grasp about what physical therapy is and what we do and how we do it. If you ask 10 people on the street what a physical therapist does, they'll all give you different answers, right? And so it doesn't matter that you're a physical therapist and you have a doctorate. All that matters to them is, can you solve my problem? Right? I'm in pain. I need the pain to go away. Can you do that? It's like, yes, I actually can. I'm an expert in that. And here's how I plan to do it. And oh, by the way, I'm a physical therapist, right? It's kind of a little bit of an afterthought. So while I agree, letters don't always matter, right? And the alphabet soup that goes along with half of the things after our name doesn't really matter. But to me, like showing that you are pursuing the DPT or a PhD or an EDD, right? That's a journey, right? And every time you hit that new phase, like the DPT or a PhD or an EDD or whatever, that's just the bus ticket to get on the bus to go and start your journey toward mastery. But it's that vision and that North Star and that drive to get toward mastery. That's the main characteristic that I look for, is like what's driving you? What's your why? And how long have you been at it? And how close are you to getting there? And there's going to be bumps and barriers along the way. How do you overcome those? How do you problem solve your way through those, right? That to me is some of the biggest telltale signs of somebody who I know is going to be a really good fit, because it is a journey. It is difficult. It's not easy. And so if you're just going to be kind of that person that's like, well, I tried it, it didn't work out, and then gives up, probably not a great fit, right? Because it's going to be a whole lot more than that. And I promise it's going to get a whole lot harder than that. Whatever you faced, whatever the first barrier was, there's going to be a whole lot more that are bigger and worse and scarier. So, if you're ready to buckle up and figure it out, then, that's it. Problem solving and drive. Those are really the, two main characteristics that I look for. And then, like I said, the letters are just a nice little afterthought.
Oh, absolutely, right? That's kind of what adds that, not to sound cliche, but cherry on top.
Yep.
I think, most people, including myself, probably would have answered that question with some objective something or other about these people. But I love your answer about drive. And something that I've learned myself as a new entrepreneur and pursuing my terminal degree and all these other things is that I do have drive that I didn't know that I had, right? What how the saying kind of how the saying goes, like endurance is plentiful. Excuse me, excitement is plentiful, but endurance is scarce, right? So people can get excited about jumping on something new, but are they going to stay and they're going to push and they're going to learn and they're going to shift and pivot to get to that checkered flag? And those are the people you're choosing. And I love that because they may not be the most published or the most famous in PT education or whatever, but these are people that are going to help you get to your checkered flag. And that's what's most important.
Well, and that's it, right? Like I have a vision, I have a rough idea of what it's going to look like to make an impact and really help the world, but it's not concrete. It's not set in stone. It is going to adapt as we grow and do new things. And the people that I'm bringing on board and involving with a lot of this stuff, like they're going to form a lot of this. They're going to show the way to get there. You know, it's like I'm at point A, I see point Z, but everything in between is going to be helped and shaped and built by them. You know, like they're going to give the recommendations. They're going to give the what works and what doesn't. They're going to let us know what drives us and what they want to talk about and what, what's meaningful to them, So I have the rough outline and the loose path and roadmap on how to get there, but it's going to be a lot of collaboration. And that to me is really key because everybody involved elevates it, right? Rising tide raises all ships. So like you're getting like the aggregate of everybody's best thoughts and ideas. And like I I talk about this a lot with my students, but like group work, that can be a really good way to come up with new ideas that you never even would have thought about because you're with other people that are bouncing ideas off everybody and you get the aggregate of what that group does. So it's a really nice way to start building that community and a group of like-minded people that are willing to push each other and elevate each other and really help each other out when it comes to thinking and critical thinking and independent thinking and decision making. So
Yeah, I love that. MOLI. We're still on MOLI, which I love because this is a really cool idea, man. And you and I have talked about this for hours. But for the listeners, MOLI is going to, for the most part, as you talked about, like the plan, right, and kind of what it looks like, your vision, and it'll shift and it'll change based on the people you bring on board and their opinions and their expertise, and of course the customers. But it includes weekly meetings, some mentorship calls, and community discussion boards with what you've mentioned as gamification. How did you come up with this interactive structure, and what benefits do you really think that it'll bring those who join MOLI?
yeah, so again, MOLI is short for the Metacognition of Leadership Institute, right? MOLI. And when I first thought about this, like the simplest way I could put it was elevated thinking for elevated thinkers, right? It's a community and a network for people to come together that want to get better at critical thinking, independent thinking, leadership and metacognition, right? And decision making skills, right? All the things that we need to be successful in life, not just in your job or in business, but in life, right? And I think about this a lot, like nowadays, especially with the election coming up, right? I'm not going to get political here, but like you're fed information from whichever side you decide to consume information from, and then most people just take it as truth or fact. When in reality, you've got to do your own due diligence and really dive in deeper to see, is this really true? And then once you get that information, it's then still up to you to make the decision whether it's true or not, and whether you believe in it enough or not to then continue to follow that path, right? So, like, we just have to be better about doing the work, the hard work, the legwork, the due diligence to see what's really true and what's not, and then what we believe to be true and what to do about it once we figure out if it is or if it isn't, right? And so it started with the we all kind of got together and I've heard this phrase over and over and over again. It's I can't believe that they got to XYZ point or grad school or whatever and still don't know how to critically think, right? And I kind of just got sick of hearing that and saying it myself, right? And so I thought, all right, well, how do we solve that, right? Because in my mind, it's a K through 12 issue. It's our education system way back is broken. So we need to fix that. But if we can't fix that, what's the next best thing we can do? Well, we'll fix who we have in front of us and people who are already pretty good or want to get better, and then teach them how to teach it so they can bring it back to the next generation or the next level of employees or students or whatever. And then eventually we start working it backwards into the K-12 system where we offer it like a program or whatever, right? Because again, like I heard this the other day, but like two of the most important things we can teach our children is just absolute blind optimism and confidence, and then independent and critical thinking. That's it. Those two things will serve them very well in life, right? So we kind of figured we needed a place for people to come together and network and grow their community and really be in a good, safe place to kind of learn about how to think and how to think about thinking and how that can then impact your decision making. And the critical thinking piece was like, okay, well, this isn't going to be easy. This isn't just like a course. Like it's going to be many months of learning and doing the hard work and doing the deep dive. And truthfully, luckily with all the research and books and things coming out, there'll be plenty of resources. So the way that we kind of structured it and thought it would be most easily digestible would be, the first week is basically a webinar, right? Like put on by one of our team leaders on what they're an expert in. And so that's the first week of every month, right? Then the second week of every month is what we like to call research to real world, where we take a research article, just like a journal club, we break it down, make it simple, and then we kind of show you the ways to actually implement it. So on Monday morning, you can go and implement something from the research article, right? Then the third week, we figured we wanted to have guest speakers in, right? Somebody who was, outside of the field of healthcare for sure, but they could be inside too, but bigger, bolder experts in thinking, metacognition, leadership, right? Critical thinking. Like, we're working on a couple of book authors that are going to come in and do guest lectures for us. And then the fourth week of every month is just that it's a book club, right? So at the very beginning of the month, we announce the book, you read the book, we all get together on the fourth week and talk about it, right? So it's a pretty easy, repeatable, format for learning on critical thinking. And then once you get into the community, there's discussion boards and stuff like that to kind of share ideas and bounce ideas off of each other. And then finally, and I think one of the best parts is you also, can opt for mentorship calls, right? And luckily, we're working through Scholarnetics, Eder's company too, to work on a clean way to just get in there, sign up with who you want, to be your mentor for that call, and work through, and problem solve and ask questions and be curious. Hey, I'm working on this project. I really need help with it. I don't know what to think. What are your thoughts on this, right? Or hey, I got this idea. I think I want to run with it. What are the pros and cons here? What do you think on this, right? Like it's a good way to have those coaching calls and those consulting calls and those mentorship calls to really learn how others think, right? And you don't have to go to the same person every time. You can kind of mix it up to, based on people's specialties and expertise. But just having that monthly call could really help with accountability. And you can do more than that as well. But it's just a neat outlet to be able to sit there and talk with somebody who's got an expertise and a specialty in something, because it really speeds up your timeline and gives you a clear outlook on an outsider's point of view on the thing you're working on, right? Because sometimes we're so into it, we can't see the forest from the trees, so that's kind of the layout of MOLI and how we're looking to deliver it and grow this community.
Love it, man, and appreciate the shout out there. So, elevated thinking for elevated thinkers. So, when I was building my company, and we were doing copy and heroes and whatever, all these things, elevated came up so many times that it made me sick. Now, hold on tight, okay? And then I started seeing other companies, even major corporations, using elevate this, elevate that, to the point where, like, whenever I see that, I just almost like gag. I'm like, oh my gosh, stop using elevated. But it fits here. It really does fit here. So like it belongs in MOLI. It's not just some elevate your career, come here. It really does fit. So here's a challenge. Elevated thinking for elevated thinkers. In one sentence, what does that mean to you?
Ooh, yeah, I mean, again, the reason we use that is because it simplifies a pretty deep, I don't want to call it definition, but like a deep meaning into four simple words, right? Well, actually, really only three words because elevated's used twice, right? But it's a complex theme narrowed down into just, four words, right? So what it really means, again, metacognition is pretty deep, and again, we simplify that even by just saying it's thinking about thinking, right? And how like meta is that, right? Hence the name metacognition, right? So it's really our awareness and our ability to think through things, right? And how we think and what we do. And so we wanted to try to come up with a theme and a tagline that recognizes that the people that are going to be in this community are already high achievers. They're already doing wonderful things out in the world, and they want to just do more of that. They want to have a bigger impact. They want to think bigger, better, quicker, faster, right? They want to be able to get their thought processes down so that they're optimized, right? And in order to do that, we really think that, and this was the major shift for me. We got to these points. We got to this high achievement point by working hard, having a good work ethic, doing more, 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 saying yes to everything and just doing all the things, right? When in reality, in order to have a bigger impact and to really scale anything, you have to actually subtract. You need to take things off of your plate. You need to stop functioning as a technician and start making decisions as a CEO, right? As a high level thought processor, right? And in order to do that, we need to kind of say, hey, we need to pause. We need to be still. We need to be quiet. And we just need to think a little bit. What can I do to get the most impact with the least amount of effort?
I'm gonna take that sentence as the one sentence I asked you for because it's
There you
epic.
go.
Because that was a lot of sentences
There
you
you
lost.
go.
Lost me. You did not lose me there. I lost count of the sentences, I should say. But yeah, so I really like that because the question wasn't so much that I asked you to describe, Molly or metacognition. I just want to know like what it meant to Scott, and that
Yeah.
last part was what I was looking for. And I think that's what's meaningful, and that's probably the fire inside of you that's driving this because just like I have a fire inside of me that's driving my business, my one of my partners might have a different fire, right? And that's what's going to drive you and help you get to that finish line. um you and I have talked about this privately many times. We've talked about it already on this podcast, and you've been very vocal about how students need to be better critical thinkers. Okay, so how does Molly how will Molly tackle this issue directly?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first step is just, they don't know what they don't know, right? And so it's introducing them to really firm grasps on the definition of metacognition, of critical thinking, right? And decision making, right? Once they have those foundational frameworks, I'm a big fan of Vygotskianism and scaffolding, right? So we give them the foundational knowledge and then bring them along little by little with scaffolding, and then once they're getting it and they're finally starting to see how to think better, and there'll definitely be some workshop stuff where there'll be opportunities to trial things and see little activities on critical thinking. One of the best ones that I love, I use this with entrepreneurs all the time, is we have to stop thinking linearly, right? It shouldn't be 4 + 4 = 8. That's what we were taught, right? It should be 8 is the solution. How many different ways can we get there, and which one of those ways do we need right now for this situation, right? And so the way I like to look at that is I say, all right, here's a brick, right? You have 2 minutes. Write down every use you can think of for that brick. Go, right? And at the end, you've got a pretty solid list of things that you can use that brick on, right? Like it's not just like, oh, I just put it in here and build a brick wall or a brick house, right? Like, no, you could use it for a ton of other different things, right? So by starting to see something so simple of just looking at a brick differently and coming up with these outstanding and crazy uses for it, that's a simple little activity that we do that really starts to show you how to think differently and how to think outside the box to come up with several different solutions so that you can now prioritize them. Then once you prioritize them, pick the one that is the best and go with it and do it and implement it. Then if it doesn't work, pivot quickly to the second one and use that one and implement that one, right? So I think through guided experiences and just utilizing a lot of our knowledge and experience that we've had in life and a lot of our team leads and really leveraging that is really going to help with the student aspect of things and bringing them along, because we do teach students on a daily basis. So we kind of get that, right? But we also want people who want to get better at it and teaching, and we want, CEOs that want to get better at teaching their faculty or staff, or in this case it would be their team members. We want to show them how to be able to teach this stuff and keep it simple so that the next generation gets it.
Love it, man. I think I would use the brick or bricks to mail one to each of my brothers as gag Christmas gifts.
Totally doable.
Why
There you
not?
go.
Right. Full disclosure, my brothers and I get along really well, so it's not like I don't like them. Here's a
Yeah,
brick.
right. It's not
Yeah.
a threat, not a
No,
threat.
not a threat. It's just like, hey, I got you something really nice, and oh, it's heavy. They open it. It's just a brick. Um, maybe with a note in there. Who knows? So MOLI officially launches in January of 2025, which is really in about, I don't know, like 7-ish weeks or something like that. A lot closer than we think. Um, what can people or listeners do right now to get involved or even stay updated with MOLI?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest thing to do is really just, if you're interested, reach out to at HET Podcast on all the socials. Just shoot us a message, and we'll get you added to the wait list. We're about to launch a newsletter, which same thing. If you sign up on the newsletter, you'll get put on the wait list. So we'll have the links and stuff for that in the show notes. But yeah, just if you're interested, tag any of us, get in touch with any of the HET team. But we're excited. We're more than anything, I think we're ready for this. We need this. It's something that's been needed for a long time, and it really solves the problem of how do I get better at critically thinking? Because again, some people don't even know what they don't know, and they don't know how to critically think. So, we have to introduce them to the fact that that's the first step. Then once we kind of bring them up the hello and a little higher, then they can realize, oh, now I can practice this stuff and get better at it. And that in turn will make them just better clinicians, better business owners, better professors, better students, you name it.
Right, a little bit for whatever that individual's needs are in that moment, and they could be an educator who is an entrepreneur, and might just want to tap into their entrepreneurial side. So I got to be on this side of the mic this time, Scott, and not on the other side. So I get to ask you this question, brother. If you could change one thing about healthcare education today, what would it be, and why?
Yeah, I mean, my answer has always been cost, right? And that's the number one most given answer. But I'm handling the cost aspect. I'm doing everything that I can, right? I've got PT Educator Student Debt Eliminator book. I've got the master class on how to, start your own business around your zone of genius and really eliminate student debt that way. We've partnered with Varela Financial to kind of help give people ideas on how, what repayment plans best for them. I'm doing everything I can on the cost side of things that I have in control of me, right? So like it's shifted now for me, and it really has moved on to this critical thinking piece, right? Like even if you're not a great student, even if you're not a great learner, that's okay. As long as you can critically think, you can solve a lot of problems, or at least figure it out, right? And so to me, I think there needs to be a deeper dive. And luckily, most PT programs have some aspect of, research and thinking, about thinking courses, right? They kind of introduce that stuff, but I think it needs to be a little bit more threaded throughout everything that we do. But also it needs to be introduced way earlier than graduate school, right? It needs to be critical thinking needs to be introduced in the K through 12 system. I don't know where, I don't know when, but it's got to be done earlier. And truthfully, if it's not going to be done, it's on the parents to introduce that to their kids. And that's what I hope that I'm able to do with my kids. So yeah, bigger, better critical thinking. That's my new answer. That's the new charge and the new vision and what we're looking to solve here with MOLI and the Metacognition of Leadership Institute. So
Elevated thinking for
yep,
elevated thinkers, right?
nailed it. You got
Scott,
it.
thanks for hanging out with me today, man, and thanks for letting me take the reins. I really enjoyed talking with you all the time. I think you and I literally have spoken for a couple of hours at a time, and we can keep going.
Yep.
Uh, you're awesome to talk to. You're a mentor of mine as well now, and I appreciate that. You're a good friend. But yeah, thanks for letting me interview you, man, and sharing all this stuff, this exciting stuff with your listeners. I'm excited about Molly. Hopefully they will too. And, they'll start reaching out to the HET podcast crew so that they can get on that waiting list and, get started because it's only 7 weeks away from when this launches.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and see you in Mali, man.
Love it. See you then.